Okay, now we are. All right. And okay, so I think, I think everybody's on who's probably going to be on tonight. All right, anyway, Carl, if some of you may not know his history, all his life he wanted to be a pastor, and
now I don't.
And now he doesn't. So
now that I know what it is.
Yeah, he started out in Dallas Seminary, and he started out here, and the church here was going to support him in that. And what, the year after you went down there, or well, I'll let you bring it up. And
well, I won't. I don't have to go in the full history.
No, I don't want you to be boring with it, but
well, I went to highlights. I went to seminary, and I really liked it. It was a great year. I mean, I had Howard Hendricks and Norm Geisler and some pretty big names, and they taught me all those. The first year you learn all these basics, like how to study and how to do inductive Bible study, and you get Greek. And into that you start getting kind of back up,
Carl. Carl, we lost you. Your signal's going in and out.
You know what? Hang on. I'm going to switch to a different internet piece. So hang on just a minute, and let me switch to that, and it should be better.
Anyway, it was Dallas Theological Seminary he went to, and he had a sponsor, and then they ratted out on him, and so then he did not attend any. After that year, he had to come back home, and then he'd go to work, and then just since I've known him, he finished.
Did you drop out or no?
He finished up his degree in the seminary.
Okay, I might go off for a second.
And for a while, he had his own fellowship there in town called God is Love Fellowship here in Grass Valley. And at one time, we had three of us. Bill Rose had his, and Carl had his, and I had ours. And so I had a number of people total. And but both of them shut theirs down. And me, I'm stubborn. So we're still going.
Well, there's some good reasons for that. So anyway, I'm on a different, I'm on that hotspot, Mike, that I'm going to be trying. I think the bandwidth is much better on that.
Okay.
So anyway, so just briefly, yeah, I went to seminary. I was about 32, and actually I was old. Most of those guys are right out of college, and I was one of the older ones, and that was still way too young because I didn't know what I was doing, but that's part of the journey. And God takes you on journeys, and so never regret the journey he takes you on. He doesn't waste anything. Sometimes you look back and go, why did I have to do that? But everything gets used. So I am grateful for everything. But anyway, the seminary experience was good, especially that first year. Maybe as a blessing, I had to leave because the church I was at was firing the pastor, and all kinds of bad things were happening back at the church, and they kind of forgot about me. So I had to leave after a year. I came back and just had to go back to my engineering job, which was good. So I did that, and was kind of a layman type person, did a lot of, but I ended up looking at everything on my own, which is very dangerous because you read all kinds of stuff. You're not getting all channeled. So I read, you name something, or name a theonomy, Christian reconstruction, charismatic stuff, Eastern Church, just everything, and trying to figure out what's going on. So I like that because I spent 40 years looking into stuff, and if I started today, I wouldn't have enough time. So I way overread everything. I did too much reading. I read 13 systematic theologies. That's a lot of reading. And but I got a real good overview of everything. So that really helps me in my teaching, helps me personally too, because it helped me get kind of, it's hard to get tugged in some new direction because there aren't any left. So that's all good. That's why I think it was a good experience for me. So yeah, I did the God is Love Fellowship for about 5 years, and I created I have 100 videos that are posted on YouTube, and they're not terrific, but they're good, and they're verse by verse like we're going to do. But I do have that one series on the history of eternal punishment that has four sessions, and I'm really happy with that. It came out really well. So you can check those out sometime if you want. So let me just say this before we start into 2 Corinthians. One thing is I want you to talk and share and all that stuff, please, because there's only one teacher and it's not me. Okay, and I know you already know this. It's God. It is the Holy Spirit. He, she, it is the ultimate teacher. And always go back to God and go back to the Holy Spirit and say, what should I believe? And he won't let you down. She won't let you down. It might take a while, and you might have to sort through your own strong feelings and convictions, but God's gonna work in you and reveal the truth to you over time. So the ultimate teacher is him. The guest teacher tonight is not me. I know you're surprised, but it really is Paul. I consider myself more of a presenter, since if I could get Paul to come in, I'd have him come in. I'd just take a back seat, but he's not here. If he is, we don't know it. And what we do have is writing. So we can read through his writing and say, Paul, you set the agenda. You bring the order of ideas, and we really are reading Paul's order of ideas and thoughts. And so he is the teacher, and we're listening to his teaching. I'm just reading it, and okay, I'll play commentator a little bit, but we can all be commentators because we're just all commentators, and we're equal on that. Don't think that because the person's read a lot, is articulate, which I'm not that much, but some people really are, that, oh, they must really know what they're talking about. That fools a lot of people. A lot of people get fooled by a good articulator. The best articulator I've ever heard is Chuck Swindoll. He is the greatest guy to listen to. He's a great speaker. Now, there are times I thought, I'm not sure I remember anything he said, but man, the way he said it sure was great. But I like Chuck. He's had a lot of good teaching that I've enjoyed, but that's a real articulator. And so it's easy to hear somebody like that and go, boy, they must know what they're talking about. Not necessarily, okay, or John MacArthur. They sound real knowledgeable. So it's okay, just always check them out. All right, so you got to do your homework. So I just present, and I'll make some comments. I'll give you information. And by the way, people with a lot of information, that's all they got is a lot of information. Doesn't make them right. In fact, I think that information goes in there and gets all scrambled up, and sometimes it comes out a little strange. So don't be fooled by that either. But I'm here to serve. I'm here to serve you and just help us march through this really incredible book. Oh, one more thing I want to tell you. If you do want to talk, please do so anytime, but you have to, this is the one problem with Zoom, there's it's a little delay and everything, so you got to go, hey, Carl, you got to say my name a couple of times. I want to say something, and then wait till I get it, because there's a delay, and I'll go, oh yeah, Donna, what do you want? And then you go, otherwise you'll start talking and it'll get jumbled. So there kind of has to be a little protocol, but interrupt anytime you want, please.
Well, the other thing, Carl, let me point out, down on the lower right-hand corner of your screens, there's a thing called reactions. And if you push on that reaction, you get to the raise your hand, and then the hand will go up in the corner of your screen.
Okay,
And
let's see it.
I did. Would you see it on mine?
Yeah, but I'm not going to see that when I'm reading the text.
No, I'm going to try to keep an eye out for you.
Okay, you can
So,
watch out for
yeah,
that, and
right.
then you interrupt and say, "Hey,
I will.
Donna wants to
Yeah,
speak,"
yeah.
or each person just say, "Hey, Carl," and then give it a second. "Hey,
Right.
Carl," do it a couple
Yeah.
of times, and that'll
Yeah.
really works the best. But you can do the hand too if you want.
Yeah.
Now, there's some other hands with a single finger that you can get, and occasionally.
All right.
Occasionally, you
All
might
right.
get that one. Okay.
Hey, get started, Carl. Okay, let's
All
go.
right, we're getting there now. Quit being referee. Okay, here we go. But let me just say something about Corinthians itself, the Second Corinthians. The reason I picked anything was I thought it might be good to just go through a book of the New Testament. And as Mike said, he's shared just about everything he has got to share, and it's been plenty, and it's good stuff. And it's usually thematic, which is fine, and that's good. But I thought sometimes it's good to just grab a book of the New Testament, just go through it verse by verse, and you've gotten the whole thing. And so I picked this one because it's probably the most heartfelt of Paul. Paul can be pretty academic, and like Romans is Christianity 101, 102, 103, and 104 put together. Second Corinthians has got this passion and this heart, and he's trying to prove some things. And one, he's trying to prove his apostleship and validate that, because he's up against people claiming that he's not, and they're claiming they are apostles and that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of passion in this book, and I think you'll really enjoy it. One more thing I want to tell you is, if you have a chance, read through this book every week, all the way through. It take you maybe or at least every 2 weeks, just work on it regularly. And I'll tell you why. And I think all of you are past already reading it one time. The first time you read something, you don't have a clue what it's about. And so as you work through the book, you don't know what's at the end. So there's no context, if you know what I mean. There's something magic about context. When you know the whole context of something, your perspective broadens. So when you read through, just reading through 1 Corinthians or 2 Corinthians once, which I'm sure you all have, you already kind of know what the book's about. And then when you read through again, you have that knowledge of the whole thing, and it starts to connect in a really interesting way that it won't the first time. So the more you read it, and the more you know about the beginning and the end and the other parts, and you're reading it, your subconscious kind of goes, oh, that kind of relates to something in chapter 13 or 5 or whatever. So it'll take on more meaning. So the more you can read it while we're studying it for the next season, I think the more you will get out of it. So it's just an idea for you to consider. Okay, here we go. Chapter 1. So this is a letter from Paul, chosen by the will of God to be an apostle of Christ Jesus, or Jesus the Messiah. And it's written from our brother Timothy. So that's who it's from. Paul is chosen by the will of God to be an apostle or a sent one of this Messiah. That's the word Christ, Jesus. And it's also from Timothy. So Timothy was part of this writing or this sending. Okay, so he says, I'm writing to God's church in Corinth and to all his holy people throughout Greece. So he's writing to a particular church, and we always get that part, and that's where the title of the letter comes from. And by the way, the letters didn't have any titles. They were added later, but that's how they grabbed this title. But actually he was writing to the people all through that region, that whole peninsula of Greece, where Corinth, I think, was probably located. And what about this holy people thing? What do you think of that? He's just writing to the holy people, not the unholy ones. What do you think of that? Who are the holy people? Holy people?
Everybody,
Why would it be everybody?
because we're all holy.
Well, there's some truth to that. We are, now what does the word holy mean? Anybody know? Just so we get an idea here.
Set apart for a holy.
Yeah, to set apart, it has to do with being set
Cleansed
apart.
and set apart, yeah.
It doesn't mean spooky. Okay, or because ooh, holy. No, it just means it's set apart. Even when we say God is holy, we're not saying he's spooky and awesome and all that. I mean, that may be true to some people, but really God's saying when he says he's holy, he's saying, I am set apart from everything else. There's nobody like me. I'm not evil. I don't do bad things. I don't make mistakes. I always succeed. He's just altogether different and set apart from us human beings, and that's good. So anyway, he's writing to the set apart people, in that actually all of us are, but not everybody was paying attention. So he probably had in mind all the believers, and he just called them the holy people of God, or the set apart, those who were set apart for salvation, which ultimately is everybody. But at that time, there were certain people who were tuned into him and what he was doing. So it was probably that group. Okay, now he gets into some really cool stuff. Now I want to read through all the way from 5 to 7. I want you to kind of think and then see if you can kind of put it all together, because he really loads a lot of ideas in here. He says, for the more we suffer for Christ, the more God will shower us with his comfort through Christ. Even when we are weighed down with troubles, it is for your comfort and salvation. For when we ourselves are comforted, we will certainly comfort you. Then you can patiently endure the same things we suffer. We are confident that as you share in our sufferings, you will also share in the comfort God gives us. That's a lot to unpack. You could probably read it several times and begin to see the relationships in there. But what's the main relationship there that he's talking about? There's some key words in there that he keeps relating back and forth between. Take your time, read it again, whatever you want. The more
Comfort. Comfort comes up a lot.
Comfort comes up a lot, for sure. For sure. What else? What else comes up a lot?
Troubles.
Or at least some.
Suffering.
What is it?
Suffering.
Suffering. Yeah. So here you go. This is kind of his thrust here. The whole suffering deal and the whole comforting deal. And boy, the two need to be related. So what things do you see there that he's saying about this relationship between suffering and comfort, other than the obvious that when we suffer, we want to be comforted? But what kinds of things do you see in there that tell us about how God works and how it all flows and goes? What can you pick out of there? What'd you get out of it?
Well, I think one of the important things is the sharing. That we're all in this together.
That's good. Very good. Yeah, absolutely. It's not just you're suffering and I'm going to comfort you. Hey, we're in this together and we're going to comfort you. You're going to, when we suffer, we know what it's about, and so we can turn right around and comfort you because we understand that.
Well, we're all connected.
In what way?
Well, we're connected in the suffering. We're connected in his love. We're connected. Yeah, we're all connected. I mean, I don't know. To me, that says it all.
Yeah, I think you've had said something important, because certainly suffering connects us. Everybody suffers, and everybody, boy, when you suffer and somebody comes along and says, I understand, or I'm here for you. I can't suffer for you, but I can kind of suffer with you, and I can hang in there with you. That means a lot. That's a real good connector, more than working on model airplanes together or something. Not that that's bad, but that connection through suffering.
I think
Yeah.
we're already connected though, and the suffering or whatever it is, or it could be the opposite. It could be joy, whatever it is that when we share that though, we have that awareness that we're connected, and we don't always maybe the awareness. I think the awareness, happens when we find ourselves, when we have to, like through the suffering, then it brings it out. We're already connected.
Yeah. Well, you're right. The suffering brings an occasion by which we can.
But it brings it to our awareness.
Yes, we're already
Right.
connected, and now it comes out, and we've experienced it and see it and feel it, and not just an academic, oh, by the way, we're connected.
But
Yeah,
then
really.
that also then develops or manifests into gratitude and thankfulness, because then you have that appreciation that I'm not in this alone, and we aren't anyway, because we've got God. We're connected to God, but it's nice to have other people sharing that and that aware, and that's just a grateful thing.
Yeah, I like what you said. It makes us realize it and calls it to our attention. And I think it actually, we become more connected,
Mm-hmm.
and at least experientially. Now I know I'm connected to you. Yeah, I was connected to you before in Christ and all that, but now I'm feeling it and I'm experiencing it. And that's a really valuable, wonderful thing. And it happens in no better way than through suffering. I wish it didn't have to be that way, but sometimes the greatest connection I have with somebody is when I'm suffering or they're suffering, and we connect on that level. We both wish it would go away. We don't want to connect this way, but sometimes it's the deepest and richest. You look back in your life, and who are you closest to? Sometimes it's the people you went through really difficult things with, not just the ones you had a lot of fun with.
Do you want to hear a funny story about it?
Yes.
Okay. So yesterday, I was suffering really badly because I was having a technology problem with my phone. Something really important I had to do, and I could not figure out how to do it, no matter what I looked up, and I couldn't call anybody really, and so I was just like, I said, okay, I'm gonna take a walk. I'm gonna walk around, about clear my head. I'll come back and I'll be able to get it. And as I was walking, this person came to my mind. I go, oh man, she knows how to fix it. She could tell me, but she's a client, and it was nighttime. So I did, but I kept thinking about her on my walk. And I got home and I no longer sat down, hadn't talked to her since November. And she texted me and said, how are you doing?
Wow. I like that.
And well, yeah, and she happens to be a pretty good Catholic, right? But I said, hey, how am I doing? I need you right now. I really need you.
Huh.
And could you help me out with this? It wasn't a session. She just was checking in on me, right?
Yeah.
So she helped me within a half hour. I had my problem solved. But she happened to be Catholic, but she's really, she does a lot of, she's just a really loving person. And so I shared with her, I said, you're not gonna believe what just happened.
Huh.
I love doing that. Anyway,
No.
it was awesome. I just like, oh my God. Oh, thank you, Lord Jesus. You always know how
Yeah.
to answer my little prayers like that, right?
Right.
Yes, right.
And if you're suffering with a computer
I
problem,
was
you are
suffering.
really, that is real suffering. Let me
Oh
tell
my
you.
God. I was so, because nothing frustrates me and gets me upset like a technology. I'm just like Mike, just like him.
What's that?
I said, I'm just like my brother.
Oh,
Technology, you
Yeah.
start cussing and all that
Yeah.
sort of stuff. But
Yeah.
I go, no, I'm going to take it to the Lord. He takes care of every little thing in my life. So we're going to go that route. Anyway,
Okay.
I'm done.
while we're down on this, and I'm gonna share in a suffering that I had many years ago, and that character at the bottom of the screen there, at least he's the bottom of my screen. That's Mr. Carpenter. I may have shared this with you all before. I don't know, but to me it's worth sharing again. I don't think I ever shared it with him being present in our group anyway. And most of you know our daughter was murdered, and so we were out in California. She was murdered back in Tennessee, and so we flew back to Ohio, and Bill and Jennifer met us at the airport. And Bill said, he said, I love you. I'm here for you. I've taken a week vacation. And so anything you need to do or go, I'm with you.
Wow.
And so we
Wow.
took, he had my son with him, and we took my son back to his mother's, and then we left, and we took June to Bill's house, left, she was with Jennifer, and and Bill and I headed for Tennessee. And so this is a long day, and we drove all night. While we're driving, now, most of you don't know Bill. Bill was vaccinated with a phonograph needle. Bill likes to talk, and when he's with somebody, if you don't gag him or something, he's going to talk most of the time. And now he always has something great to say. That's not the problem, but I usually have to interrupt him to get a word in edgewise. Well, on this trip, and we drove all night, and I think we exchanged driving, as I recall, but there were times when I did not want to talk. And in these times, I really didn't want Bill to talk to me. Not one time did I have to tell him to stop talking. He read me, and the Holy Spirit taught him or whatever, but when I needed quiet, I needed to be in my own thoughts, he stopped talking. Just totally stopped talking. Then there were times that I wanted to talk. I wanted him to talk to me, and I wanted him to share with me. And he would start talking. And this was the whole trip that we had going down there. And it was amazing to me. And the fact that he took a week off his vacation at his own time, I mean, that was wonderful enough. But it was the sensitivity that he had to know when I needed to talk and when didn't need to talk, was a sharing with me in my suffering, and I've never forgotten it. and that we were already good friends, but that totally endeared him to me. And now, by the same token, that lady up in the corner there, Junie, she's always been my comfort whenever I needed comfort. So I'm not saying that she wasn't. She was, but as a
Where am I?
as a comfort in this trip, Bill was it. And so he knows something about listening to the Holy Spirit.
Yep. Well, and then this passage, it's interesting because he says, when we are comforted, it's for your comfort and will comfort you. And when we suffer, it's for your comfort and will comfort you. So either way, whether we get comfort and we can pass it on to you, or whether we suffer and it reminds us to comfort you, that can be applied to us as we deal with other people. Yeah. And then when we're on the receiving end, appreciate it all the more and let them, let people comfort you. Sometimes we get a little too proud to receive it. Don't deprive them of their joy. Okay. Anything else on that section 5 through 7?
I like the part there, Carl. I like the part where it said that even though we have the affliction, that it produces something in us in the long run. It isn't just for the moment. It says that it produces patience. In other words, it takes
Good.
some fear away, because we look and we see we've been through this, or we see a friend that has been through that. And that's kind of what he's saying. I'm going through this thing, but it's for your comfort that I'm doing this, because you take a look at me and watch. I'm going to make it through here. And when I make it through, then you'll have the patience to go to the end. When you're afflicted with these same things, you'll have the patience to go through. So we just don't go through it to see how much we can stand. We go through it as he produces in us the lack of fear and the trust in him.
Well, and that whole phrase of patiently endure just reeks with this. It could take a while. That sometimes it takes a while. It's not just step in and fix it and move on. Sometimes it can be weeks, months, years that you go the distance with somebody. Yeah, there you go. That's great. Okay, let's move on. Verse 8. We think you ought to know, dear brothers and sisters, about the trouble we went through in the province of Asia. We were crushed and overwhelmed beyond our ability to endure. Wow, beyond their ability to endure, at least he felt like it. And we thought we would never live through it. In fact, we expected to die. But as a result, we stopped relying on ourselves and learned to rely on God, who raises the dead. Let's stop there. Well, that's quite a story. Thought they were going to die, and what came out of that, felt overwhelmed. We're not going to be able to endure this. This is too much. And what happened? They stopped relying on themselves and relied only on God, who raises the dead, by the way. And that's probably the basis of it, I think, is that they said, well, go ahead and kill us. We know where we're headed. We're headed for the resurrection. And you can't stop that, guys. You can go ahead and kill us. Our hope, and you'll find this consistent throughout the New Testament, the real hope is in the resurrection. It's not even getting over cancer or getting through another thing, or we want the suffering to stop, and boy, is it nice when it does. But ultimately, we're all going to die, and our hope has to be in the resurrection of the dead, which is the cross, the death, resurrection of Christ, his ascending, and then our resurrection. In fact, everyone's. The day will come when all who are in the graves will come forth, said Jesus. What do you think? Anything to add?
Well, I think what's really important here is to realize that, because he said we were crushed and overwhelmed beyond our ability to endure, and it often takes suffering for us to realize and become humble enough to recognize we don't have the ability to withstand a lot of the troubles and trials that we go through. And usually we kind of learn little by little that God is big enough to handle our problems, but we learn through small problems. And it's tough when you have all of a sudden a big one if you haven't learned to trust in the small ones.
Yeah.
Learn that God is the one who's capable and who cares and wants to give you comfort through all of this stuff. And he doesn't necessarily take it away. And I ask him to take it away a lot of times, but he usually doesn't take it away right away. He winds up giving me the grace to withstand it. But I know that I can't deal with these things on my own. And over the years, I've learned that I don't even try anymore. When something hits me, I just almost immediately just say, "Here, Lord, this is yours. I'm not taking this on." And I'll take the trouble, the stuff that's on, I'll take that, but I'm not going to take the internal suffering. And I'm going to trust you for that. Recently, in the last couple of years ago, I was really, really sick. I took the sickness on, but I did not deal with any internal stuff. I dumped it all onto him. And I said, I just as soon die. So let me die. But he didn't let me die. I still had to stick with the suffering. And but I really went through that pretty joyously.
You didn't get off that easy, did you?
No, but and the joy didn't come from me. It came from him. And that was, looking back, I wouldn't trade that time.
Well, Paul's going to deal with what you mentioned later in the book about getting something that doesn't go away, and what you learn from a prolonged illness or a prolonged suffering that doesn't let up. Those are tough, but there's a special kind of thing we learn, and you mentioned it, that His grace is sufficient. You don't learn that in a week or a day. Sometimes you have to it has to be your conclusion that if this never ends, your grace is going to be sufficient. That's a tough one. Now, you mentioned, Mike, that if you get through some little ones, you can deal with the big one. And that's true. And I think the reverse is true too. If you can get through a big one, the little ones start to fall into perspective. And sometimes you get through a big one and the little ones aren't so big anymore. I remember when I was young, the things I thought were big turned out to not be that big because I was young and inexperienced. And when I went through some really big ones, then the ones I have now, or the little ones, kind of fall into place. And that's part of growth and maturing. And that's a blessing. That's a silver lining in all the suffering. There are many silver linings in suffering. I've told people this, and I've had people tell me that they would never, ever sign up for the suffering they went through, but they would never, ever give up what they learned from it.
Right.
They just wish there was an easier way. And apparently there's not.
Right.
Carl,
Yes.
can you hear me? Because I'm
Yes,
not
ma'am.
on the
Yes,
picture
ma'am.
anymore. I think we lost me at the beginning. You don't see my picture, right?
Yeah, we got you.
Oh,
You're
yeah.
on.
Oh my goodness, I can make faces and everything.
You can. You've been making faces. Every time when Mike speaks, you make faces.
I wanted to say something because there's a passage in Joel that I learned to really like. And it's in Joel, the second chapter, the 25th verse, where God says, I will repay you for the years that the locusts have eaten.
Mm.
The young locust, the swarming locust, the destroying locust, the devouring locust. And since that was an agriculture society that he was writing in, if your crops were destroyed by locusts, you were going to go hungry.
Mm-hmm.
But he promises to repay all those years of the suffering.
Mm.
And I just love that, because anytime something really comes up, I remember, I will repay you for the years that the swarming locusts have eaten.
Have you experienced that?
Yeah, I have sometimes. Yes,
Yeah.
I have.
Yep, I agree. Not quite the payback I wanted, but it was the payback
She
that he
got me.
decided I
What
needed
she
to
got
get.
me? What more payback does she need?
No. You know, Mike, someday Bill and I are going to get together. We're going to be in the same room with you, and you're not going to be able to interrupt both of us. So you'll be in trouble.
I'm eager to see how you each get to talk.
Oh,
Not-
we'll do great. We'll do great. As long as you don't interrupt us, we'll do fine.
Yeah, don't worry.
Okay, anything else on that? That's good stuff. Okay, so backing up just a little bit. In fact, we expected to die, but as a result, we stopped relying on ourselves and learned to rely on God, who
Right.
raises the dead. See, that's where the real solution is ultimately.
Yep.
And something? No. And he did rescue us from mortal danger. Okay, in this case, now later he didn't with Paul. He died in prison somewhere, but this time he did. He rescued us from mortal danger, and he will rescue us again. Okay, and he did get rescued again, but that had to quit eventually. We have placed our confidence in him, and he will continue to rescue us. I think he knew he still had things to do, but then you read his swan song in, I don't know, one of the Timothys, and he says, basically, he says, I've run the race, time to go. I'm out of here. He's not talking like that yet. I think you know when your time comes. I think you get some clues. I think God, and now some people don't, they just die in a car wreck, but I think he starts giving you a little heads up. Hey, we're getting close. So get ready emotionally and look forward to being with me. I think that we'll be surprised at how sufficiently he takes care of us. We worried, there are people worried their whole life about dying, and when they get there, it's okay. I've seen people do that. My mom did that.
Yeah.
She was ready. Same with my dad. He said, yeah, it's time. I'm good. I'm ready to go.
That's one of the prayers that I've asked the Lord for, and that I believe will be answered. I back many years ago, I was no longer afraid to live, and when I realized that, and I realized I was no longer afraid to die, and so I asked the Lord. I said, I want to know. I don't care how long it is, but you know, whether it's a couple minutes or a couple weeks or whatever, I just want to know that when I am going to die shortly, because I've experienced living grace, and now I want to experience dying grace.
Right
And
on.
I don't want to die in my sleep unexpectedly. I want to know that I am dying. I'm eager to go through that experience.
Okay, you might just get it.
I
sounds
plan
good.
on it.
No.
I plan
Yeah.
on it. There's
No.
not many prayers that I pray that I believe I'm going to get the answer, but that was one I do. Yeah.
Yeah, it's unusual. You know, there are people out there that are afraid to live and afraid to die.
I know it.
They're
I
not-
used to be.
They're not
Yeah.
at peace with living and peace with dying. Some people are not afraid to die, but they really are afraid to live. And there are
Yeah.
people who are afraid to die, but they're not afraid to live. They go for the gusto. But
Yeah.
to have both, to have peace about both. And I've had times like that too, where I'm kind of, life's overwhelming. I go, man, I'm afraid to do this. And I'm with you. It's one of the silver linings of old age is you just kind of settle in, and I'm okay with living. I'm okay with dying. It's all right. And that I didn't know I was going to get this little joy when I was younger. So
By the way,
Yeah.
I will share this. I'm having trouble with old age. So I'm having trouble with the Lord with old age about this. You know, I don't mind dying, you know, but being old and decrepit is really bugging the hell out of me.
That's usually everybody's real bugaboo. They're not, I mean, the believers, they're not afraid to die. They're afraid of dying in the process. But let me give you my little take on that. I think it's number one, it's God putting his final touches on us as a masterpiece painting. And the brush strokes can be painful. Number two is I wanted to write a book on this someday, maybe I will. It would be called The Last Great Lesson We Teach Our Children. And how you go and what you can teach them in the way that you face death.
Yes.
Not just your faithfulness to God, but his faithfulness to you is a huge lesson. I'm so thankful for my dad. He kind of set the pattern, and I'm going to do what he did. I watched him and I go, I can do this. So that was a great lesson for me. My mom and my dad both taught me how to die by doing it and doing it well, finishing well. That's a real blessing of a lesson you will teach your kids and other people around you.
Carl.
So do it well, Mike. I'm gonna be there right at the side, holding your hand and saying, how's it coming out here? And you're gonna go, this is great. I'm loving it.
There you go. Yeah. Junie?
Carl?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
I know a lot of people don't care for Rush Limbaugh, but this was so precious. It was on the radio the other day. When they knew he was dying, he has stage 4 cancer in his lungs, and they're pretty sure he wasn't going to live. So his wife and he sat down to plan what she called his event.
Okay.
So she said, well, you've been a very important man, and you're certainly not ever going to be president, but I think you ought to have a real great send-off. So actually, he was buried in Missouri, and when the plane landed, they had a horses and a carriage to haul the casket to the cemetery. But when they were discussing this, he says, when they discussed all they were going to do, and they were believers. I mean, they are believers. It was wonderful. He said, gosh, I wish I could see this. This is going to be the greatest thing. I wish I could see it. She said, well, Rush, you're going to have a front row seat. And then she said, he said, well, and she said, Rush, you better not be late. And he said, Catherine, you're in charge of that part. And that was all. I just thought it was very sweet and precious. And there was no fear there. They were talking about his death, and it was fun.
And they were laughing. They were laughing, weren't they? And
yes, they were. Oh,
cutting
yeah.
up and joking about it. Yeah.
As it should be. It should be a celebration.
Yeah.
Yes.
But it's, I call it, well, you're grieved and relieved when someone goes. I was relieved when my dad went, but I grieved. So it was an unusual combination of feelings.
Yeah.
Those two usually don't come together.
Yeah, Donna or June could easily tell you about when our mother died, and when we were going through that, and that's wonderful. But first of all, I want Bill to tell what his father-in-law said on the last day, or near the last day. Bill was visiting him in the hospital. Tell about it, Bill. I know you know what I'm talking about.
Well, yeah, he was getting ready to go, and he called me into the room, and he asked me if I would pick him up and carry him out so he could look out the window, and just one last time.
Yeah.
He just wanted to look out.
Yep.
And he looked over at me when I put him down, and he said, if these damn people would leave me alone, I could go home. They were there to visit him.
Yeah.
But I would like to share something about, you just talking about, even as a believer for years and years, I was apprehensive, just like Mike and like Carl was saying, about not dying, about the dying part, about how I was going to go and whatever. I knew where I was going, and I wasn't worried about that. And I was up at my pastor was Herb Roush, and his brother was dying. I didn't know that. I'd only met him 3 or 4 times, and I got a phone call, and I was up at Lena's house, and they turned around and said, Bill, could you come to the phone? And I said, yeah. And I went there, and it was Robert. And he said, Bill, could you come down? And I said, for what? He said, well, I'm going to die tonight. And he said, I'd like to talk to you. And like I said, I'd only met this guy about 3 or 4 times. So between fear, apprehension, and all the stuff, because I didn't have a clue what was going on, because I knew he didn't know me that well, we loaded up in the car, and Lena went with me, and Jennifer, and we went down to the house. And he said, come on back here. And he was in bed, and I walked back. He said, I got something I want to tell you. And I said, what's that? He said, I thought that the hardest thing that I would have to do would be to give up stuff and to let go. And he said, he said, Jesus has been here all day. And he said, it has been just absolutely fantastic. He said, the peace has just been so great. Mm-hmm. So I'm still sitting there wondering why I'm in this conversation, unless he was going to grab my hand and say, you're going with me. And so anyway, he just kept talking, and he had done a lot of things and up at Michigan and the Bible class and stuff that he had up there. He never mentioned all the time that I was sitting there. He never mentioned one time anything that he had ever done in his life. All he talked about was the sufficiency of Jesus and how the peace that he had. And he said, and I'm going to go tonight. He said, I just wanted you to know. I said, well, why? He said, because for some reason, I wanted you to know that he's going to be there doing the same thing to you when you go. And I never worried about how I was going to die from that point on, because I knew that he was going to be there. It didn't have nothing to do with pain. It didn't have nothing to do with disease or anything. And I always thank the Lord for that, for almost a stranger calling me down just to say, Jesus has been here all day, and he's come, and I'm going to go home. And he did. And we left and went home, and he did go home to be with the Lord that night. So there's a lot more than we can know that we think we can know. And his patience and love is so sufficient for us that even when we don't know how afraid we are, he already knows and made provisions for all of that. So I just thought that was very unusual. That, in fact, I just told a lady, she's 96 years old, and I was visiting with her this afternoon, and Jenny Powell, and she's wanting to go home so bad she don't know what to do. And I told her that she wouldn't go for a while because God don't take complainers up there, and she just complained all the time. And she said, what are you doing here? And I said, well, he don't take coffers either. Because he's got things he wants to say, and I won't let him say anything.
Okay. Yeah. Well, look at what he was focused on. That's a lot of what brought him peace. If you're focused on all the terrible, your life and how awful things are, and some people do, but if you focus on him, and I'll tell you, that will be different.
Yeah.
That's a good thing to remember. Okay, great lessons. Okay, let's finish the section, and are we getting near time, Michael?
It's about 3 minutes till, I guess, something like that.
Okay. So verse 10, and he did rescue us from mortal danger, and he will rescue us again. We have placed our confidence in him, and he will continue to rescue us. And you are helping us by praying for us. Then many people will give thanks because God has graciously answered so many prayers for our safety. Wow. So this is a very complex interaction of things, the prayer, the people watching and learning from, just like what we've been talking about. And like I said, sometimes we know God's going to rescue us, and he does, and other times you're done or you do stay in jail or different things. But often he does deliver. If he delivers you, there's a reason for it. If he doesn't, there's a different reason for it. But you'll win either way. He comes through. Whatever happens is the right thing. It just can be different for different people at different times in different journeys. So we tend to think, if I pray, I get an answer if things turn out good, and that's not true. You get an answer when things turn out what we call bad, because it wasn't supposed to turn out the other way. There's a purpose in it turning what we would call negative, and yet some very positive things may come out of that that'll only come that way, and we might not even know about it. So you really got to just put your confidence in the one who does know and believe he knows what he's doing, and we don't. And that's not that hard to do.
Well, he always delivers. He either delivers us through it or out of it. But he always delivers.
Yeah.
I don't think
Yeah.
there is never a time when God does not deliver. We're not always aware, or we're not, maybe if we're not walking in the truth, we may fight it and everything about it, but God always delivers. And after 80 years of living and going through all kinds of stuff, he's always delivered me. And not in my timetable. That's the thing that gets me. It's my timetable is not always the same as his, but he always comes through. That's what I can assure you of. What?
Eventually he's going to deliver you from me and Bill by taking you out of here. So
yeah.
Till then, sorry, pal.
And we will both rejoice.
Yes, there you go. Paulo, you need to share before you fall asleep there, buddy.
Yeah.
Any thoughts?
My thought is we are never victims, and
right.
We have a very we have this to think that we are victims, that we are, the things are coming to us and that we are suffering, and so that makes us victims, and we are under, we are losing, we are separate, and it's really, we never separate, we never victims of anything, because we are in him, and that's really,
yeah.
I like that.
We're always overcomers, and I think that later on in this book, this chapter, this 2 Corinthians, we're going to hear that again.
But as believers, we're victors, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Victims. Yeah.
Yeah, the book's going to get better and better. I guarantee it.
Mike and Junie, I both. Before we quit here, Junie, did you want to make that prayer request?
Oh, I just would like prayer for my grandson who's in Kuwait.
Oh, okay. Sure.
They're starting to do a little bit of bombing over there, and I've been noticing.
Okay. Will do.
Okay. All right. Thank you all. Love you all, and thank you all for being here. We will hope to see you next week. Take care.
Verse 12.
Everybody does anybody have anything else they want to say before we close? Okay. Love you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.